This is the GoreTV podcast with your hosts Jill Valentine and Sebastian Castellanos. Let's get into the show.
So, are you ready to walk back into the fog with James Sunderland?
Oh, absolutely.
The Silent Hill 2 remake. It's got everybody talking.
Yeah.
And for good reason, right? I mean, it's a chance to either revisit a horror classic or maybe, for some people, experience it for the very first time, a whole new audience.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, what's really striking about Silent Hill 2, even all these years later, is how psychologically disturbing it is.
Yeah.
It really gets under your skin in a way that very few games manage.
It's not just the jump scares.
No.
It's not the gore. It's using horror to look at something else. It's using horror as like a lens, wouldn't you say?
Without a doubt.
To explore something deeper.
Absolutely, yeah.
Trauma, guilt.
It's about those sort of really dark, uncomfortable corners of the human psyche that, we don't necessarily like to confront on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, even our source material for this deep dive calls it a, a descent into psychological horror.
Perfect way to describe it. It really is. Every element of that game, from the creatures you encounter to the environments you explore, it's all steeped in symbolism. It's all reflecting the inner turmoil of our main man, James Sunderland.
Right, and what better place to even begin to unpack that than with Silent Hill itself?
Yeah.
The town, I mean, it's not just a setting, it's almost like this character.
Yeah.
In and of itself.
Absolutely, and that's what's so fascinating about Silent Hill, is that it acts as this kind of mirror, right?
Yeah.
To James's psyche. So everything that he's feeling internally, his guilt, his trauma, his repressed memories, all those things he's trying to bury deep down,
right?
They manifest in this physical, tangible way in the town itself.
It's constantly reflecting back at him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even that oppressive fog that kind of hangs over everything, that's not just for atmosphere.
Right.
It represents James's own kind of inability to see clearly, his inability to confront the truth of what's happened.
And that makes his decision to actually go there all the more interesting. Disturbing, but interesting. He gets this letter, supposedly from his dead wife, calling him back to this town.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, just even trying to put ourselves in the mind of James here.
Yeah.
What's going through his mind as he's crossing that town line?
Oh, I mean, you have to imagine this potent mix of grief, desperation, maybe even this tiny little glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Right? But I think underneath it all, there's this pervading sense of inevitability. Like he knows deep down he can't outrun his past.
Wow.
And Silent Hill, it's almost like it's waiting for him.
Oh.
Ready to confront him with everything he's trying so hard to forget.
Speaking of things that James is trying to forget, let's talk about Pyramid Head.
Oh, yes.
I mean, this is a creature, just even the way he looks, grotesque appearance.
Yeah.
This massive, massive blade, he's instantly recognizable. I mean, he's become an icon, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. He's one of the most iconic figures in horror gaming, I think, without a doubt.
What is it about him that's so disturbing?
Well, I think, again, it's more than just his appearance, terrifying as it is. It's what he represents. Pyramid Head, he's a manifestation of James's guilt and this deep-seated desire for punishment that James has.
Huh.
Think about how he interacts with Maria.
Oh, right. Yeah, Maria.
Who, of course, we should say bears a striking resemblance to James's deceased wife.
Right. She looks like Mary, but then her personality is completely different.
Completely.
And it's interesting because it's almost like James is clinging on to this idealized image, this fantasy of what his wife was.
Yeah, it's this idealized, almost fantastical version of his wife that he's desperately clinging to.
Yeah.
And each time Maria dies, and let's be honest, it happens a lot in this game. Each time that happens, it reinforces James's inability to escape the consequences of his actions. Right. He's trapped in this cycle of guilt and this yearning for something he can't have.
Right.
This desperate attempt to kind of recreate what he's lost. And of course, the harder he tries, the more horrific it becomes.
It's like the game is trying to tell him, you can't just conjure up this perfect version of the past.
Exactly.
Live in it. You can't escape.
You can't escape it.
And it's not just Maria, right? And it's not just Pyramid Head. There are all these other creatures that James meets during his time in Silent Hill. And there's just this raw, visceral quality to all of them.
Absolutely.
And they all get under your skin, but in different ways. What are they about?
Well, that's just it, isn't it? It's,
Right.
Because they're not just random monsters. These are pieces of James's fractured psyche given form.
Oh, wow.
They're physical manifestations of his deepest fears, his anxieties, his repressed memories. Take, for example, the lying figures.
Yeah.
Those kind of contorted, bound figures that you see throughout the game, even without knowing what they represent.
They're awful.
They're deeply unsettling. But then when you learn that they're connected to James's feelings of helplessness
Yeah.
during his wife's illness,
It has a whole other layer to it.
it has a whole other layer of disturbing to it. Yeah. And it's not just the visual design either.
Yeah.
Think about where you encounter them in the game, often in these really cramped, suffocating spaces that further emphasize this feeling of being trapped,
Right.
of being completely unable to escape this awful situation that's slowly consuming you.
Powerless.
Absolutely.
And it's not even just those feelings of helplessness. Like, some of the imagery in this game gets really uncomfortable really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
The mannequins.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about an image that just is burned into your brain.
It really is.
For all the wrong reasons. 2 sets of legs fused together. I mean, what's going on there?
Well, I think, again, the game is tapping into something very specific with that imagery. Those grotesquely intertwined forms, they're not just there for shock value. They point towards James's repressed sexual frustrations, the complex and deeply uncomfortable emotions that he grapples with, particularly during Mary's illness.
Yeah, that's right.
Silent Hill 2 doesn't shy away from these darker impulses that we often try to ignore, not just in ourselves, but also in others.
Which I think brings us to another fascinating layer of this whole thing, and that's the multiple endings. Because you said earlier that Silent Hill, the town itself, is a reflection of James's internal state. But it's not just that, right?
Right.
The choices that we make as the player factor into this.
They factor into a huge...
Massively. So how do those multiple endings, I mean, they're not just a gimmick, right?
No.
What are they doing for the larger story that Silent Hill 2 is trying to tell?
I think they're a way for the game to challenge our perceptions, of morality, of responsibility. Are we guiding James towards some kind of atonement? Or are we the ones enabling his self-destruction?
Wow.
It becomes this weird kind of moral inventory almost. It forces us to confront the potential darkness within ourselves as well.
It's one of the things that makes me want to go back and replay it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you realize you have agency,
Yeah.
but it's in this completely messed up reality.
And that's the thing. You have this illusion of agency.
Right.
Because you can make different choices, you can take different paths, you can potentially discover a whole new side to Jones's story, or maybe even to your own in a way.
Yeah.
But the fact that you, as the player, hold that kind of power in this incredibly distorted, twisted reality.
It's kind of meta, right?
It's hugely meta. And I think it adds this whole other layer of, because we talk about video games as escapes.
Yeah.
But Silent Hill 2 really kind of turns that on its head.
Yeah.
It implicates the player in James's journey. It's suggesting that maybe we're not so different from him after all.
Yeah.
We all have our own Silent Hills. We all have our own shadows, our own secrets we're trying to bury.
Which I guess is the central question. If you or I were to step into Silent Hill,
Yeah.
what would our hellscape look like?
What would our personal hellscapes look like? Exactly.
Yeah, what our monsters be?
And perhaps even more importantly, would we have the strength to confront them? That's the real question that Silent Hill 2 poses. And I don't think it offers any easy answers.
Yeah.
If anything, it forces us to sit with those really uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, I think, why it lingers in our minds so long after we put the controller down.
We've talked a lot about the psychology, which is obviously a huge part of what makes Silent Hill 2 so effective. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the atmosphere. Because, man, they nail it in this game.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Just the environments themselves.
So impressive.
They're heavy.
Yeah. Take, for example, Brookhaven Hospital.
Oh, yeah, great example.
The place is literally crumbling around you. Rust, you've got the flickering lights, these kind of echoing silences punctuated by these distant screams.
You can almost smell the disinfectant.
You really can. It's almost like this assault on your senses
Yeah.
before you even factor in any of the creatures.
Right.
And that's where I think Silent Hill 2 really excels, is how it uses its environments, the atmosphere, the sound design to get under your skin.
Oh, the sound design.
Oh, my God.
Don't even get me started.
Whoa.
So good.
It's phenomenal.
It's all of it.
It's all of it.
It's not just the visuals, it's the sound, it's the story. It's using all of these things
Working in concert.
to worm its way into your head.
Absolutely.
It's a masterclass, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
In using every element at your disposal to create a truly unforgettable and, frankly, terrifying experience.
Which is what makes this remake so interesting.
Yeah.
Because you've got this whole new audience coming in who maybe haven't played the original,
Right.
and they're expecting one thing.
Yeah.
And Silent Hill 2 is...
They're expecting jump scares.
Right.
They're expecting gore.
Yeah, and it's
Oh,
like,
God.
it's going to be much more insidious.
Well, it gets under your skin, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's much more
It
cerebral.
really burrows into your psyche and makes you
Yeah.
question things. And, yeah, I think for a new audience, encountering that for the first time,
Yeah.
it's going to be fascinating to see how they respond to that.
It really speaks to how timeless those themes are, though, right?
Absolutely.
Guilt, loss,
Yeah.
facing those darker parts of yourself.
Those are universal themes that
Yeah.
have resonated with people for centuries, really. And
And if anything, they're probably more relevant now
I think so. Yeah.
than they were back in 2001.
Because I think, especially now, we're so bombarded with information, with this need for instant gratification. Social media, exactly. It's all about curating this perfect image of ourselves, this online persona.
Right.
And I think we've lost sight a little bit of, the complexities, the flaws, the darkness that makes us human.
You can't just Photoshop that stuff away.
You can't Photoshop it away no matter how hard you try.
It's going to come out, right?
It'll always find a way.
One way or another.
Exactly. Whether it's a creepy, dilapidated town filled with monsters or, those anxieties that keep us up at 3 a.m.
And that's the scariest thing.
The scariest monsters are the ones we carry within ourselves, I think, ultimately.
A lot to think about.
There is.
Even for those of us who've been to Silent Hill a few times
Absolutely.
in our day.
Yeah.
But I think that's the mark of something special.
Yeah.
That's something that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And makes you think.
It makes you think. And it hopefully makes you understand yourself a little bit better, which,
Or at least makes you want to sleep with the lights on.
or at least makes you want to sleep with the lights on
Yeah.
and maybe invest in a good flashlight.
That's right. Well, there you have it. Silent Hill 2. Get ready to face your fears
Oh, yeah.
and question everything you thought you knew about horror. I'm going to go sleep with the lights on now.